Greeting everybody. Today we're looking at a new unit, unit number 4, testing writing. So let us begin. So when we test writing, we want to see if students are able to produce or write using the target language. That is why indirect testing like grammar or sentence correction isn't really ideal on its own. I mean, yes, these types of questions can be useful. They help students, improve their accuracy like grammar or sentence structure or vocabulary. But the problem is that they don't really show us how well someone can write a real paragraph or essay. They, don't show if students can organize their writing in a formal structure or connect ideas clearly and logically. So if you want to test your students' writing ability, test it directly. Asking them to write is the best way to test their writing ability. Speaking of testing writing directly, there are 3 things that we all need to keep in mind. Firstly, we need to set the writing tasks that can show the students' ability to write. Secondly, your writing tasks should only test the students' ability to write and nothing else. Last but not least, your writing tasks can and will be scored reliably. We are going to explore these 3 parts in more detail as they are, the main things that all of us must know about testing writing. So when we talk about setting writing tasks for a test, we mean deciding which kinds of writing students should be able to do. This is going to be based on what we expect students to achieve, like writing a formal email, or writing a short story, writing an opinion essay, or a report. But this also comes down to whether you have taught them those specific types of paragraphs or essays or not. Again, we cannot test what we don't teach. Now, we want to think about all these types of tasks before setting the tasks because we want to make sure that we can set as many writing tasks as possible. But in practice, we usually can't test them all, so we can carefully select a sample of these tasks that best represent what students should be able to do, what you think students should be able to do. But why do we want so many tasks in a writing test? That is because each task is a fresh start for students to show their ability. A student might be able to do well on writing a story, but they can be struggling with writing a formal email. So if we only test one task, the score might not fully represent their writing ability or their writing skills. So selecting different tasks help us get a more accurate picture of their abilities. But of course, we need to create a balance between how many tasks we give and what is practical. So if the test results are used for important decisions like a university admission or a study abroad, we may need more writing tasks to create a fair and reliable result. But for a less practical, a less critical purposes like class placement, then fewer or even one writing task might just be enough. So if you go to a school and take a placement test, then it's likely that they won't ask you to write multiple writing tasks because they don't need to know that many, they don't need that many samples to determine where you are. You know what I mean? Yeah, so that's what we mean by setting the tasks, setting the writing tasks. The second important part of testing writing is testing the student's ability to write and nothing else. So that means we are not trying, to measure how creative, how imaginative, right, students are, or how much general knowledge they have. We're not testing their intelligence or public speaking skills either. We only want to know how well they can write using the target language. So the writing task must be clear and focused on the language used, not the ideas, okay, that need special background knowledge. For example, if your writing tasks are write a conversation about a holiday you plan to have with a friend. Now, this writing topic, this writing task doesn't really require writing ability that much, but rather the student's ability to display their creativity and imagination in creating that conversation. If your writing task is, for example, you spend a year abroad. While you are there, you are asked to talk to a group of people about life in your country. Write down what you would say to them. Now, this specific writing topic doesn't really focus on the writing ability again, but rather the ability to give a talk or a speech on the topic. A good example of a writing task that tests writing ability would look like this. The advantages and disadvantages of being born into a wealthy family. So this writing task would require students to follow a certain essay format, organize their arguments, use certain words or phrases to show compare and contrast. So whatever topic they get, they will still be able to write using what they know about writing that specific writing task. So make sure that the task instructions are clear, easy to understand. If students struggle just to understand the task, you're not really testing their writing. You're testing their ability to read. So keep the instructions concise, specific, and make sure that the writing task, comes with clear instruction and easy to follow. Okay? So again, we only test their ability to write and nothing else. We don't really care about how creative they are. We care about whether they can follow a certain structure, they can organize their ideas in a certain way, depending on the type of writing task that they are dealing with. Another important point when designing writing tasks is to restrict the candidates. And that just basically means making sure that students do not go off topic or interpret the task too freely. Sometimes the same student might write very different responses to the same writing prompt on different days. That's because the task is just too broad or unclear. So it is important to define the task well, so that students should know exactly what they need to write about, and their responses should also stay focused on the topic. We don't want them to go astray. Okay, we want them to stay on the topic, write about what is required of them to write. One way to do this is by giving supporting materials like bullet point notes or even pictures to help guide their ideas. Now, this can help students stay on the topic and reduce variation, and it's easy for you who scores the writing tests, okay, the writing productions. So there's one thing you need to know though. You need to be careful, because since you are literally giving them clues, in a sense, try not to give full sentences or too much information, because if you do, then students might as well just copy those ideas instead of producing their own writing. So yeah, we need to restrict them. By restricting, we mean just scoping your writing task down to a certain aspect, so that the students do not go off the topic or write about something else that is not required of them. And it's easier for you as well, as you are correcting the students' writing. Last but not least, we need to think about our scoring method for our writing tasks to ensure reliable results that can represent students' writing ability. Before choosing a reliable scoring method for writing, we must ensure that our writing tasks have these 4 main components. First and foremost, right, we need to make sure that we have set as many writing tasks as possible, so that students can have a fresh start at writing something that they can be good at. So just because they do not know how to write an email doesn't mean that they do not know how to write a story. So we have, many tasks. By many we mean three. I think two is ideal, three is good, right? Three, that is a good number for that, right? Three writing tasks should be enough, should be feasible enough for students to explore their writing skills, for us to see whether they can do what they're supposed to do with those types of writings. And then we must restrict the candidates, of course. Again, like I said earlier, we want them to stay on the topic. So make sure that our instructions are clear, specific, short, easy to understand, and they know exactly what they are required to write. We also cannot give any choice of tasks. If you give them choice of tasks, it makes it difficult for you to compare their answers, their writing productions. So if you ask them to, okay, they can write about whatever they want, then it creates that inconsistency, okay, among their results. So if you ask those students to write the same topics, you may get different results, but you know exactly how you want to score their writing, because they are going to follow a specific scoring method based on that writing task. And last but not least, we have to ensure that the samples, the writing tasks may require students to write are long enough. This is because if, let's say, you want to check the student's ability to organize information in their writing, then we must ensure that the writing tasks has that room for student to write a long piece of writing. Otherwise, we may not be able to see that organization ability, right? Okay, and we need to also consider the length and the number of your writing tasks too. If you set too many writing tasks and require students to write a like 400k word essay, then it might not be practical. Consider that practicality, right? It might not be practical because, again, there is a limit in a test. There's a time limit in a test, and these are the two things that we need to consider really, really, yeah, we need to consider them. Yes. All right, so now we have come to the selection of scoring method for testing writing. And we are given two options. One is holistic scoring method, the other is analytic scoring method. So we're going to look at the holistic scoring method first. So for the holistic scoring method, sometimes called impressionistic scoring method, it means giving just one overall score to a piece of writing based on your general impression of it. So the big advantage is that it's very quick. Experienced scorers can read and just score a one-page writing in just a few minutes. Because it's fast, the same writing can be scored by more than one scorer, which of course helps make the scoring more reliable too. For example, we often, as you can see on the slide, use this scale, right? If you do not know how IELTS score you, they base it on, I believe, holistic scoring method, and that also applies to your overall band score and your band score for each skill, right? They use this holistic scoring method. If I'm not wrong, I could be wrong. Okay, so they give you a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 9 here, and each number shows how good or how competent you are in terms of your writing ability. So with holistic scoring method, we focus on the overall quality of the writing, not every single detail. So at first glance, after going through your writing, they would just go, all right, I think this writing deserves an 8 or something like that. So it's fast, it's easy, it's quick, and multiple people can correct that same paper, that test paper, right? Okay, for example, if they, after going through your writing, they may just say, okay, I think this is a good user because of this, right? As you can see here, if you get a 7, that means you have a good command of English, some inaccuracy, okay, some inappropriate words here and there, right? They're not looking in details or anything. That's what I mean by holistic scoring method. Okay, they just slap a number, okay, that determines how good you are, right? An expert user, a very good user, a competent, a modest, depending on what they think, right? What their impression is, okay, on your writing. Analytic scoring method, on the other hand, looks at different sub-skills of a student's writing to determine their ability. So unlike holistic scoring method, the analytic scoring method doesn't really judge a writing based on an overall impression, but rather breaks the writing down into separate categories such as grammar, vocabulary, organization, ideas, structure, and then they give separate score to each one of those sub-skills. And there's always a clear rubric for it. And students also know exactly what they expect to do to get the most scores possible by just looking at the rubrics, right? They know exactly how their writing is going to be scored, is going to be judged. And there seem to be a lot of advantages for using analytic scoring method. Firstly, it helps students and teachers see exactly the weaknesses and strengths in each sub-skill. Secondly, the scorers will also look at a, you know, a detailed aspect of a writing, okay, which means more an analysis rather than just reading the writing a bit and then say it's a 7 or an 8. Of course, I understand that they actually, have the ability to judge your writing, but you cannot see exactly what's wrong. You know what I mean? You know that you get a 7, but you don't know how many mistakes you made with your grammar, vocabulary, or whatever. You don't know exactly because there isn't a really detailed breakdown of how your writing is judged, but rather their impression, right? Okay, so that is what makes analytic scoring method, seems to be more reliable in a certain way because we analyze the writing in detail. But there are also some disadvantages as well. Okay, things like, of course, I mean, time consuming is the main disadvantage here, and the other main disadvantage is you know the the fact that we actually neglect the overall effect of the writing. So instead of looking at the production, right, the with the production of the writing, we focus too much on the process, right? We focus too much on the individual aspects of the writing rather than the overall effect that the writing can give. Okay, yeah, so these can be the two main disadvantages. We sometimes need to care about their production too. Okay, accuracy is one thing, right? Accuracy is one thing, but production is, at the end of the day, the most important in a writing test. So now the question is, which one's better? Which one should you use? Holistic or analytic scoring method? And the answer is, as always, it depends on the circumstances, and this is the most important, it depends on the purpose of your test. So if your test is a diagnostic test, for example, then the analytic scoring method will be more appropriate since you are trying to determine to find weaknesses and strengths of the student's ability. But if you are doing a placement test or a final achievement test where your purpose isn't to provide feedback in a sense or to find areas of improvement, but simply testing their ability to write after having studied for a certain period of time, then holistic scoring method might be a more applicable scoring method to go for. Okay. Again, analytic scoring method works well when you seek for accuracy in a language, but if you don't want to focus on the accuracy aspect of it, you want to see, you want to test students as a group, students who come from different places. You try to put them or classify them into a specific group or class, or you want to test their proficiency, then holistic scoring method is just the better way to go. And yeah, and one more thing though, and that is the scoring of your test. Again, it's ideal to have two scorers, but like I said, it's not always available. 90% not always available. But again, it's ideal to have two. And try to start correcting your paper when you are in a good mood or in a quiet place, because your mood can affect the way you score the productive, productive skills. Yes, your mood can really interfere with correcting productive skills, which mainly is writing in this topic, in this unit. Okay, and that is the end of the unit. I really hope that it's enough, but if it's not, please prepare some questions and feel free to ask.